Okay. So, Chinese balloons. What the fuck is that all about? Let's go through it. So, you know that there was a Chinese balloon spotted floating somewhere across continental United States, and well, we're going to go through it. So I've got a good breakdown for you. So it's yeah. So the way it's being reported is thusly. So there's the headline from the Guardian. That was yesterday. Chinese balloon was clearly for spying, says the US. Uh, was it for spying? Well, let's find out. Well, no, it wasn't. But let's find out. This has all to do more with. So I've had this. It's a revelation to me. It's new news for me. It's a new realization. So what America has done, what the US has done, is in order. Look at the state of my hair. Holy shit! It, in order to fuel its war machine, which fuels a significant portion of its domestic economy, it sends its soldiers to war. We're talking about way back, a post World War II. The big one being Vietnam, but it became a domestic propaganda disaster because everyone turned against the war eventually. They got sick of seeing their sons and come home in body bags, in such numbers. The soldiers that were being drafted didn't want to be there, clearly didn't believe in the cause, and were openly anti-war. So the next big engagement America had, it had many engagements, but the next big one after that was the Iraq thing. And if you remember what they did, they embedded the journalists. Can you remember that? You didn't have independent journalists going out on their own, taking their own risks. They got embedded with a troop of soldiers, and they reported from that position. Now that clearly compromises your reporting as a journalist. That you're clearly compromised. You clearly can't do the job of being an independent journalist as you and I would think. Going out, looking, reporting, stating facts, and offering opinion and occasionally. And we know this because the journalism that basically came out of Iraq was dog shit and wasn't journalism. Wasn't journalism as you and I would want it. Now, you roll on forward and you get right up to Obama. And one of the things that Obama did, and I remember this at the time, I remember this happening and going, right, okay, I know that. He banned, they used to, whenever a dead American soldier would be brought back to the US, they would come off the plane with the flag draped coffin, and they would have the little ceremony, and the family would be waiting, and it'd be very sad. That would be filmed, and it would be broadcast on the news. Obama banned that. Clearly, there's only one reason why you would ban that. Clearly. You're not so stupid. I'm not so stupid that we need to explain why that would be banned. Right? It's the propaganda war. So it's to take the eye off the ball. It's to distract people. It's to make people, the only narrative that they have. If you listen to MSNBC and CNN and BBC and Sky News, etc., etc., if you listen to these outlets, if you can control that narrative, if you can control those outlets, you place your people in as spokespeople, as independents from think tanks, right? This is all a part of this whole propaganda network. And if you're getting your news from just those places, then you're going to think Chinese spy balloons is a real story. You're going to think this is a real thing that happened. Now, this happened the day before. Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State, the US Secretary of State, was due to visit China and have a visit with Xi Jinping, the president of the Chinese Communist Party and the leader of China. This is unusual. The Chinese don't do that. The US Secretary of State doesn't get meetings with the president of China. It's a big fucking deal. He will meet with his Chinese counterpart. The president of America will meet with Xi Jinping. Is a meeting of equals, such as it is. But we know that Joe Biden isn't capable of that meeting, and it wouldn't go very well. He'd probably shit himself in front of the Chinese president, which wouldn't be a good look for the US. So this story is manufactured. Basically, Anthony Blinken then withdraws from going to China, and it's in order to do what? It's in order to create the Cold War propaganda, the narrative. This is all a part of it. America wants to fight its wars with other people. Taiwan is being teed up to fight a war against China. Ukraine was teed up to fight a war against Russia. Poland is next, etc., etc. This is the dominoes that are being put onto the plane, the board, the playing surface, the board game of US global war games. This is what they're doing, basically. I'm tripping over what it is I'm trying to say here, but you get my point, I think. And Taiwan is next, and this is the now. So these stories will start to skip off. A while ago, Nancy Pelosi did a video on it. She goes and visits Taiwan and bangs the drum of war against China for Taiwan. The Taiwanese people are not falling for this. They voted that government out in the elections that immediately followed Nancy Pelosi's visit. It's not working over there. So this is what's happening, and this is a part of. So Vietnam, Iraq, you embed journalists. Obama bans the viewing of the coffins coming off the planes, the dead American soldiers, because it doesn't look good. They embed their own spokespeople into the TV news studios. They embed them into the newspapers. They own the newspapers. The Washington Post, etc., is owned by Jeff Bezos, who has contracts, multi-billion-dollar contracts with the CIA. So this is what this is. So you feed that you feed that machine, and that narrative, that whirlpool goes down into your ear, and then your only global perspective is USA good, China, Russia, everybody else bad. Right? So this is what it's all a part of. And this is an example of that. So let's go to this. So I found this Twitter thread. Actually, somebody else found it and showed it to me. So I'll read it to you. And it's good. It'll explain it. Let me just give my glasses a wee clean there. I've got more glasses coming. I realise these glasses make my fucking head look small. My head is not small. I have a big old Irish head on me. And, but anyway. I don't like the wee small ones. They're fucking too fiddly. So anyway, here we go. So this is by a dude called Arnaud Bertrand. Not the real, put that back. Not the real Arnaud Bertrand. The French philosopher. So, and it's got a bit of legs, this thread, because it's only a short thread. A couple of articles have been written about it. I wonder, I should find the article as well. I've got it anyway. So, here he goes. It took a bit of time to dissect the spy balloon story. Both how it is portrayed in the US and China's response. As you'll see, the more you think about it, the more stunned at the sheer absurdity of the whole thing. Here we go. First, the US story. China sent a spy balloon over highly strategic US sites. It chose to spy on these sites with a big visible balloon, reported as being as big as multiple school buses. Why is that a unit of measurement in the US? Explain that to me. If anyone from America knows, everything's the size of football fields or school buses. You know, it doesn't make. It's not a unit of measurement that people use. You have, for some reason, you still use imperial instead of metric. But even give us that. I don't know how big a fucking American school bus is. As big as multiple school buses that anyone can see with the naked eye from the ground, to demonstrate it had the capability, despite having a plethora of other more discreet ways to spy, like satellites or stealth drones. Unclear that anyone doubted China had mastered the technology of, checks notes, hot air balloons, and why it therefore needed to demonstrate this capability. It is absurd. See, when you think about it, for a minute. China is sending balloons to spy. It's not going to spy on us through our mobile phones like Google does and Facebook and everybody else. No, I mean, China's doing it too. I'm not an apologist here. Whatever the US is doing, China's fucking doing as well. You know what I mean? It is beyond bizarre. So, China chose to do so on the eve, here we go, on the eve of Secretary of State Blinken's visit to China, where he was invited, and hours after signalling Blinken would also be attending with Xi during his visit, a high-level meeting not granted to any Secretary of States, US Secretary of States in years. And there's the headline from Asia Pacific. Blinken to meet China's Xi during Beijing visit. The Financial Times. So, the story therefore being that China chose to disrupt a meeting with its own president and to sabotage its own efforts at détente in the US-China conflict. The Pentagon said it had been tracking the balloon for quite some time and that it wasn't the first time such an incident occurred, but this time, for unclear reasons, it chose to do a public announcement. As a result, Blinken announced that he was postponing his China trip. Now the story from the Chinese side. To them, this is a fluke accident. The balloon being a civilian airship used for research, mainly meteorological purposes, that deviated far from its planned course because of strong westerlies, wind that flows west to east. And there's the Chinese. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the People's Republic of China, there's their statement on their website. You can read that if you like. Wind that flows east to west and limited self-steering capability. This is the balloon, of course, which is the nature of these fucking things. You can't steer them. They go up and down and you drift on the wind. The main characteristic of a balloon being, of course, that can only go up or down. A piece in WAPO, the Washington Post, seems to confirm this, quoting experts in national security and aerospace, who said the craft appears to share characteristics with high-altitude balloons used by developed countries around the world for weather forecasting. And there's the article there in WAPO. Experts in national security and aerospace said the craft appears to share characteristics with high-altitude balloons, developed countries, etc., etc. The payload wouldn't offer much in the way of surveillance, posed no serious physical or intelligence threat, according to the Pentagon. The Pentagon itself said that the payload wouldn't offer much in the way of surveillance and that China couldn't collect through spy satellites, and that the balloon posed no serious or physical or intelligence threat. Now, this is the Pentagon are saying this at the time. Now, roll forward a week, I showed you at the beginning of this video the article from The Guardian where they said it was clearly spying. They weren't saying that a week ago. I.e., the Pentagon themselves say it would make zero sense for China to use a balloon like this for intelligence purposes when it has satellites. Kind of begs the question why they decided to make a big deal out of it in the first place. And there, my friends, is the question that we need to ask. That's the real crux of this. What? Why? They can do the spying, all the spying they need with satellites. I dread to think that there's people out there that have got photographs of me having a shit, but there is, without a doubt, because of these goddamn things. Why would they send a balloon that is clearly visible to the naked eye? They can't steer it. It's just drifting on the fucking wind. Why? That's the question. Why? And why make a big deal out of this? So, Mr. Bertrand goes on. I'll let you decide for yourself which story makes more sense. The sheer ridiculousness of this nth Red Scare episode is absolutely obvious to anyone with an iota of common sense. Except, sadly, common sense seems to be in critically short supply nowadays. Excuse me. Also, as often, the real story is probably why this story became a story in the first place. And the important context here, of course, is Blinken's visit to China, which could, one can always dream, have been a step towards some form of de-escalation in China-US rapport. It was quite easily foreseeable that a story like this one on the eve of the trip would have made it politically very difficult for Blinken to go. So a plausible hypothesis is that this whole episode is an attempt by internal US forces to prevent any China-US détente. One alternative hypothesis, much less likely, is that it's internal Chinese forces trying to do the same thing by sending this big balloon. So he's, the author here is going into it here. So it's clearly ridiculous. It's clearly manufactured. So let's explore. Let's go down the avenues. So if it's not the US doing it, it must have been the Chinese doing it. If it's not the Chinese government doing it, it must be forces within China looking to undermine détente between the US and China. So let's go for it. China, who believe so if it's Chinese forces, China has time on its side. So it's unlikely because China has time on its side so it gains from reduced tensions with the US, and there isn't any obvious faction in China who believe the contrary. B, it would be immensely risky for anyone in China to do something like this, as it'd undoubtedly be seen as an act of high treason with grave consequences for themselves. They'd be executed. C, again, balloons like this one. C, balloons like this particular one basically can't be steered. So to plan on sending a balloon like this in the first place from China to place over the US land isn't even doable. The last hypothesis, which I guess is also somewhat likely, is that this is a series of unfortunate events without malice on any side. The balloon deviates from the course, gets into US airspace, people see it, the Pentagon feels it has to communicate about it. 3, the media, wearing their usual China bad hat, decide to go all in on the scaremongering. 4, political opposition and China hawks jump on the bandwagon. 5, administration feels it has no other choice than to cancel the trip and doesn't have the political courage to say this is just the balloon that drifted off course. Well, I guess in this scenario, there is in fact malice on the media's part, and that of politicians and wider members of the blob, but it's organic malice, so to speak, jumping at the golden opportunity to scaremonger. Conclusion: however you see it, this story is absolutely shameful and a sad reflection of the insane times we live in, when rather take the time to carefully consider facts, apply reason and common sense, we instead choose as a society to incite fear and hostility. So there we go. There's another headline from the Guardian. Chinese spy balloons. What a load of bollocks.